Hello and welcome to this KNX product development how to start webinar. My name is Christophe Partoens, so the presenter of this webinar. Okay, so what is the scope of this specific part? It actually covers the use case where a KNX product will be developed from scratch. So really completely from zero, so to say. So that means that that you need to use the KNX specifications in order to make sure the device will be certified, because that is of course the purpose of this all, so that your customers can use your product in ETS. So the specific parts covered by this webinar are so first the KNX device, so have a look at it from in this context, so we can distinguish three parts, and then I will address the different volumes that you need to also use in this context. So to give you an overview, volume 6 the KNX Profiles, volume 4 hardware requirements of the product, feature requirements in volume 3, and volume 7 interworking. So okay, let's start with the first part then, KNX device. So we can indeed distinguish three parts, which is first of all, it is the base of the product is the KNX profile. On top of that profile, we need to set up the hardware, and on top of that we need to set up the software, or also called application program. And it's indeed the combination that will make up a device, a KNX device. And of course, sooner or later this device needs to be connected to a KNX medium. Here we see the different volumes. So for the KNX profile, we need to consult volume 6 of the KNX specifications. For the hardware, we need to consult volume 4 of the KNX specifications, and for the application program, we need to consult volume 7 of the KNX specifications better set. Okay, so KNX Profiles, volume 6. Well, statement first is here on the slide is that KNX is a platform independent system. What we, however, want to avoid is that anyone makes just a random selection of features, so of features that are specified in volume 3, and just builds something. No, that is of course what we don't want, because we want to indeed fix the behavior of the KNX devices with the purpose to ensure interworking, to ensure compatibility, and this in two different aspects: the operation of the device, so that means at runtime, and the configuration of the device at management. And therefore the selection of features has actually been limited, if I can use that word in this context at least. They have been set up these let's say these selections of the selection of features. They have been defined as KNX profiles. So that means indeed just before you start with the development of your product, you need to choose the KNX profile that fits to your product, or the product that you have in mind. Also, please note that a combination of KNX profiles within one device is also allowed. So that is also another possibility again. Okay, then volume 6, for the rest I can say, okay, each profile will always refer to volume 3, so to the actual system specifications, to the actual feature requirements, and also at the same time it will refer to stipulations in volume 8, which is the volume for conformance testing, so where you can find all details about the feature test procedures. So that's volume 6. Hardware requirements, volume 4. So here we see the overview that there are 4 parts in this volume 4. part 1 is about the hardware requirements for a KNX product. So that will cover, that covers the electrical and functional safety of a KNX product, the EMC requirements, and power consumption. In part 4.2, or the second part of volume 4, the safety and environmental requirements are stipulated. So concretely here we will find the EMC test setups, so both for radiation and immunity. In part 3 of volume 4, called Assessment and Test of Electrical Safety, the further test setups like high voltage test are listed in this part. And then in part 4 of volume 4 there are also some stipulations for the installation safety requirements. So not only there are requirements for the device as such, or for the individual device, but also on installation level. So what is the information we can find here? So stipulations for grounding, for overvoltage protection, cable location, links to possible other circuits, and even for twisted pair. What are the rules for the use of the second twisted pair? Feature requirements then, so volume 3. Well, volume 3 are, so to say, the actual system specifications. The first part is about the architecture. So here we will find one chapter. Well, the first chapter is, better said, is about the actual architecture, which gives us a rather academic overview of the system. And in chapter 2 of this part 1, we can find a glossary that contains all formal definitions that we can find within the KNX specifications. Example given, IA. Then we can find out, okay, IA is the abbreviation for individual address, GA is the abbreviation for group address, etc. Part 2 is about the communication media. There are in total 6 chapters here: Twisted Pair 0, Twisted Pair 1, Power Line 110, 132, Radio Frequency, and KNX IP. As you can see, 2 of these chapters are in gray. That means that those communication media are no longer, they are discontinued, so they are no longer further developed. Also, it means that products for this communication media can no longer be certified. So what's left is actually everything in blue: Twisted Pair 1, Power Line 110, Radio Frequency, and KNX IP. Part 3 then, communication. So according to the OSI model, the OSI layered model, we can then distinguish several chapters, 6 or 7 in total. I forgot the exact number. Okay, let's find out. First chapter is the physical layer in general, actually, so it just gives an overview of the physical layer. Then chapter 2 is the data link layer. So here we can indeed understand in the context of KNX what exactly is meant by an individual address, a group address, a domain address, etc. So that's pure on the data link layer. Network layer then, so we can understand the difference between group communication, point-to-point communication, broadcast communication. And then there is transport layer. So typically here we will find the information how a product needs to communicate with ETS, so how to program it actually. So that's the transport layer. And then the session layer and the presentation layer. So according to the OSI layer model, we have to put this in our specifications, although that these chapters are empty in the case of KNX. They are simply not used in KNX product. So what's left is the last layer, that's layer 7, the application layer, which contains a list of so-called APCIs. application protocol control information. So it's actually a list of all services that have been defined so far within KNX. So services like memory write, memory read, group value write, group value read, etc. Okay, so then the application environment, that's part number 4 of volume 3. And there's only one chapter here, it's called the application interface layer, and so it deals, so information that can be found here is actually about the link between the application program and the application layer in order to access data. This data can either be available as via a group object server, an interface object server, or a file server. Part 5, management then. So concretely, how we can learn how to program a KNX device here. So 3 chapters in total. First chapter is about the resources. So that is actually a list of all possible resources that can be put in a KNX device. So that is everything from, let's say, the smallest resource being the programming bit, till the entire address table. Just to give you 2 examples. The management procedures then. So here we can, with management procedures, we can understand how to set up a KNX how to set up a connection with a KNX device, how to do error handling in case something goes wrong. If, however, the KNX, if the connection with the device, with the target device, so the device that we want to program, is okay, then we can indeed go on to the next chapter, so to say, and that is where we can learn about the actual configuration procedures. So so literally how to configure a KNX device. Part 6 is about the standardized interfaces. So we can learn here how to communicate with a KNX device. There are different ways. There is chapter 1 that explains the details on the application programmer's interface, the so-called API. So if the profile comes with an API, well, then it's explained in this very chapter here. So that's one way to communicate with the device. Another way, that's one way. Another way is explained in chapter 2. So the physical external interface, abbreviated as PEI. So this is actually a standardized hardware interface between a device and an application module. Chapter 3 then is the external message interface, the so-called AMI. The context here is that the user application actually runs in an external microcontroller. So AMI is actually to be seen as a set of messages, standardized messages, that are used, that need to be used, that can be used between the device and this external microcontroller. And just to give you one example that we all know very well is the common AMI, which is used for USB interfaces. So just to give one example. Okay, then part 7 is about interworking. It's actually a list of, it contains information about the data point types. So there are 3 chapters here. That's the chapter 1 about the interworking model. Just explains it. Explains the model indeed, the concept. And then the actual data point types. So there's a list of all data point types here, and their encoding, etc. is listed in this very chapter. So we have the complete overview here. Concretely for a KNX device, in order to have it certified, if example given, your device has a data point or an object that needs to represent temperature, well, then you need to look up here in this list what data point type has been foreseen for temperature. You cannot make your own temperature data point, so to say, or data point type, because certainly for temperature there is already something. If, however, there is a data point type there, or better said, if your object has represents data for which no data point type exists yet, of course, then you have the possibility to add it, at least to apply for it. And how to do that, that is also explained in chapter 3 here, actually, together with other information that can be found in chapter 3 is about the standard identifier table. So all constants that have been identified so far, like the properties of certain interface objects example given. So what are the property IDs? So their identifiers. Of course, these identifiers have been given a specific value, a specific constant, and that's the list. And all these constants, all these identifiers, they are listed in chapter 3 of the interworking part of volume 3. Part A, KNX Not IP. So here also 5 chapters, if I'm not mistaken, in total. So first the overview, just shows the general requirements for a KNX Not IP device. So the explanation about the header that is used in every KNX Not IP frame, so to say. So the general requirements. Then chapter 3 is about the core, the so-called core. That is actually even here the information about the headers is going further in the sense of how to make how to decode the headers, how to set up the headers that are used in every KNX Net IP frame. Then chapter 3 is about management, so how to configure such a KNX Net IP device. In the tunneling chapter, so chapter number 4, it's about tunneling, so it's how to use a KNX Net IP device as an interface. And chapter 5 is about routing, so how to route telegrams from TP over IP and vice versa. And then last part, so the application descriptions in volume 7. Well, the importance of this chapter, of this volume, is to make compatible products. So that means to assure runtime interworking. So examples of applications are lighting, shutters, blinds, HVAC. So any function that can be found in a KNX installation. However, here we find the description how it needs to be set up. So lighting shall be set up in such and such way, a shutter or shutters function or blinds, whatever, in such and such and such way. So there's really very clear explained how to set up all these specific functions. So you cannot just invent your own building function, so to say. So you have to follow what is in this volume 7. Otherwise, the runtime interworking is not guaranteed, which means if the runtime interworking is not guaranteed, your product will not be certified. So for SMO devices, this means that volume 7 actually specifies which group objects must be on board within the function, including the data point type per data point or per group object. And for E-mode devices, so here I mentioned E-mode a bit maybe intentionally, because after this webinar it could be useful to indeed follow also the E-mode webinar in case E-mode would be in your interest as such. But okay, I just want to mention it. Maybe for now, okay, I just leave it as it is. Indeed, just to mention that there's also something like E-mode, because the focus on this webinar was actually S mode. Okay, then I guess I am done talking here, and that means that I actually can conclude the webinar. But before I really conclude the webinar, I want to, well, first of all, want to thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention, and maybe we see one another then in one of my next webinars, so the manufacture tool webinar example given. Yeah, okay, so I guess that's it. Also, maybe indeed to mention that I will send you the slides so that you can look at them yourself, well, yeah, at home, wherever you want to look at them, so to just review this webinar. So there are still some follow-up webinars that we can recommend, but as such the webinar is now finished. And before I conclude the webinar, I want to still present a few extra slides, and while doing that I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for your attention, for considering KNX, and maybe we see one another in one of my future webinars. So thanks again, and goodbye.